At 3:47 a.m., the air over the port of Miami was heavy with salt, diesel, and a warm coastal wind that never really lets the city sleep. Sodium lights washed the container stacks in pale orange. Water slapped against concrete pilings. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounded from a cargo vessel idling offshore. The streets feeding the port were mostly empty, but not silent. You could hear engines cut. Boots hit pavement. Radios whisper. Then everything changed at once. FBI entry teams moved first on a bonded warehouse disguised as a marine electronics importer. DEA units hit a cold storage facility 2 blocks away that had been logging fake seafood shipments while receiving cocaine loads packed inside insulated containers. Knott's ICE tactical teams raided a Hialeah trucking office investigators believed was coordinating migrant smuggling pickups as cover traffic for narcotics transfers. In Doral, another strike team rolled on a logistics consulting firm whose paperwork had tied it to ghost shipping companies and sealed freight corridors. Near the river, agents breached a members-only nightclub that looked empty from the outside but had an underground counting room beneath the VIP floor. On the western edge of the county, a suburban mansion hidden behind hedges and imported stone gates was surrounded before anyone inside could get to the back dock. The city did not wake up all at once. It woke up in fragments. A flashbang in one district. Shattered safety glass in another. A convoy racing north for half a mile before federal SUVs boxed it in near an access ramp. Men in black moving through fogged loading bays like shadows, shouted commands in English and Spanish, the smack of hydraulic tools against steel doors. One suspect sprinting across a container lane with a duffel bag so overloaded with cash that it tore at the seam. Another trying to dump burner phones into a drainage channel before he was tackled face first into standing water. 3 armed guards in a Doral warehouse opening fire through shrink-wrapped pallets before SWAT teams pinned them down behind forklifts and concrete pillars. Inside the first warehouse, the numbers started climbing fast. 212 kilos of cocaine in false flooring. 48 kilos of heroin sealed inside marine battery casings. More than 800,000 fentanyl pills hidden in boxes labeled navigation components. 15 rifles. 19 pistols, 2 suppressed carbines, body armor, frequency jammers, and a cash room stacked with vacuum-sealed currency bricks, so dense they had to be moved on rolling carts. In the Hialeah office, agents found forged IDs, debt ledgers, route schedules, and coded manifests linking human trafficking houses to the same dispatch map used for narcotics loads. In the nightclub below the riverfront district, they found a cage door behind a liquor shelf leading to an underground vault where accountants had been counting cartel cash under red emergency lights. And still the operation kept widening. At a luxury condo tower overlooking Biscayne Bay, federal agents forced entry into 3 separate units registered under shell companies. One was empty except for servers, satellite phones, and gold bars tucked inside custom cabinetry. One held passports from multiple countries, prepaid devices, judicial contact lists, and handwritten notes referencing cleared inspectors and soft docs. The third was not a home at all. It was a command suite, digital route boards, port schedules, freight scanner windows, offshore transfer timings, lists of containers to inspect, containers to ignore, and containers to reclassify before they ever touched open customs review. And then came the first twist. In a climate-controlled room behind a false wall at the marine importer site, agents discovered 6 encrypted steel cases, 4 tamper-proof drives, and a sealed lockbox containing internal payment sheets. Not just names and amounts, titles, ranks, departments, procurement channels, port access codes. A federal agent opened one folder, read 2 lines, winked, and then looked up with the kind of expression that tells you the raid just stopped being about smugglers, because what they were staring at did not look like bribery. It looked like governance. By 10:14 a.m., inside a federal cyber forensics center outside Miami, the story turned from violence to architecture. Screens glowed blue in dark rooms. Analysts worked through cloned drives while evidence teams photographed every sheet, every ledger, every note with obsessive care. Outside, South Florida sunlight poured across parking lots and palm trees. Inside, it may as well have been midnight. The first breakthrough came from a hardened laptop pulled from the Biscayne condo. Decryption cracked open a hidden partition, and from there, the analysts began to see the full map. Not a gang roster, not a single smuggling route. A network. A sprawling, layered, disciplined criminal ecosystem that stretched from Pacific supply points through Mexico into Gulf and Atlantic channels, through maritime and overland corridors, then into South Florida's ports, warehouses, trucking depots, cash businesses, and property shell fronts. At the center of the digital blueprint was a project name that appeared again and again across manifests, wire instructions, safehouse logs, political donation funnels, and movement orders. Project Black Harbor. That was the engine in this fictional dramatization. Project Black Harbor was not designed just to move drugs. It was built to make Miami indispensable to the cartel's Atlantic-facing empire. Analysts uncovered shell companies in Florida, Delaware, and Panama. Ghost corporations registered through law firms that dissolved and reappeared every 18 months. Sham charities in Miami-Dade that claimed to support youth development while washing bulk currency through gala events and grant cycles. Restaurant chains, freight insurers, bonded warehouse operators, marine fuel vendors, customs brokerage firms, and real estate holding companies, all linked by disguised transfers that looked ordinary until they were laid side by side. Money moved across the map like blood through hidden arteries. Small invoices, emergency shipping fees, vessel maintenance adjustments, green logistics credits, coastal resilience consulting contracts, hazard pay, dock security upgrades, container sanitation charges. It was brilliant in the ugliest possible way. The cartel had not built one tunnel through a wall. It had built hundreds of administrative tunnels through paperwork, and then the analysts found the key. A recurring encrypted authorization stamp appeared on route diversions, customs bypasses, asset protection directives, and schedule changes tied to high-value shipments. The same signature appeared in instructions regarding cocaine transfers, fentanyl pill shipments, migrant smuggling corridors, offshore cash consolidation, and a list of untouchable containers that were never to be opened without secondary approval. It linked directly to one man, Leandro Voss. Publicly in this fictional story, Leandro Voss was a polished port logistics magnate, shipping investor, donor to civic redevelopment campaigns, and behind-the-scenes political fixer with friends in procurement, zoning, transit planning, and maritime insurance. He wore tailored linen in daylight, dark suits at night, and carried himself like a man who solved problems for wealthy people. He funded scholarship galas, sat on trade advisory panels, appeared in photos beside ribbon cuttings and hurricane relief drives. But hidden inside Black Harbor, his digital signature authorized load protection, law enforcement blind spots, replacement crews, and selective inspection failure across South Florida. He had not merely protected the Sinaloa Cartel's access to Miami, he had engineered the city into a secure coastal fortress for it. One analyst, staring at a network diagram with Voss's key at the center, said it quietly enough that only the people closest heard it. "This is not corruption," she said. "It is command-level collusion." Another looked deeper into the recovered financial logs and found something worse. Black Harbor had continuity plans, arrest contingencies, media influence matrices, backup freight corridors, emergency bribe ladders, judges marked by probability of delay, port inspectors tagged by usefulness, local politicians categorized as allies, liabilities, or future investments. The system did not depend on one shipment or one crew. It was built to survive arrests. It was built to survive headlines. It was built to survive the loss of expendable people. And in case you still think this sounds like ordinary organized crime, here was the most chilling part. The operation was patient. No flashy convoys, no public massacres, no theatrical displays meant for social media. This empire hid behind refrigerated trailers. Inland warehouse leases, marina fuel invoices, tax records, and property acquisitions around freight choke points. It moved like serious business because, in this fictional tale, serious business had become its camouflage. Then came the file that made the room stop moving. Harbor Crown. It was a strategic plan. Long-term, multi-phase, quiet, precise. Its goal was not just to expand trafficking. Its goal was to convert South Florida into the permanent Atlantic command platform for a Sinaloa Cartel distribution alliance stretching into Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, Texas, and up the eastern seaboard. Port influence. Rail handoff partnerships. Trucking corridors through I-95. Secondary cash routes through luxury real estate. Human trafficking channels used as pressure and cover. Migrant smuggling flows exploited to overload enforcement bandwidth, while high-value narcotics moved through cleaner channels. The analysts understood immediately. The raids that morning had only struck the skin of a much larger machine. By 4:28 a.m. the next day, in a hardened command center west of Miami, giant digital maps pulsed red from South Beach to Hialeah, Doral to Homestead, Port of Miami to warehouse belts near Medley, and farther north along I-95 corridors where the network's outbound arteries fed the rest of the country. Dozens of markers glowed across storage yards, luxury homes, trucking depots, bonded terminals, marina properties, customs offices, money transfer fronts, and suburban stash houses. A few flashed offshore, tied to vessels believed to be floating safe nodes for last-minute transfer orders. The mission order came down hard. More than 1,200 federal personnel, 52 SWAT and tactical elements, FBI financial crimes squads, DEA narcotics units, ICE transport interdiction teams, DHS support crews, aerial surveillance, marine interdiction support, armored vehicles, K-9 teams, drone reconnaissance around selected warehouse districts, emergency medical units on standby, simultaneous warrants across Miami-Dade and linked sites northbound through South Florida's shipping and highway network, and then the region lit up. Near the port, agents hit a customs brokerage office and found manifest alterations tied to nearly 24 protected shipments. In Hialeah, a truck repair compound turned out to be a conversion site, where hidden compartments were installed into trailers moving north under legitimate produce contracts. In Doral, a federal agent stormed a windowless warehouse holding industrial pill presses, precursor chemicals, and over 2.1 million fentanyl pills packaged for outbound runs. In an upscale waterfront estate on the edge of Miami Beach, a private security force tried to delay entry long enough for hard drives to be destroyed, but evidence recovery teams beat the wipe cycle by minutes. In Homestead, a transit yard used for agriculture shipments concealed cocaine loads inside irrigation equipment bound for inland depots. Along the expressway, 2 coordinated interdiction teams stopped what looked like routine freight convoys and pulled nearly 300 kilos of methamphetamine from a trailer loaded with frozen fruit. Elsewhere, the hits kept coming. A cartel-run bar in Little Havana with a secret accounting room behind its walk-in cooler. A massage front near the airport tied to coercion debt books and trafficking rosters. A gated mansion in Coral Gables that served as a meeting house for fixers, lawyers, and transport coordinators. A marina office hiding offshore account details, coded marine route schedules, and a cache of passports ready for emergency escape. A storage park near Medley holding currency counters, vacuum sealers, assault rifles, encrypted radios, and enough cash to fill a small armored truck. By midday, the seizures were staggering. More than 3.4 tons of cocaine across linked sites, hundreds of kilos of heroin and methamphetamine, millions of fentanyl pills, weapons, crypto keys, luxury vehicles, waterfront properties, warehouse leases, shell company ledgers, server racks, private communications hubs, protective detail rosters, Leandro Voss's inner circle, the senior cartel coordinators, accountants, corrupt dock supervisors, dispatch planners, lawyers who knew too much, brokers who thought paperwork could outlast blood. In 6 hours, the fictional underworld of South Florida took more damage than it had in 6 years. But then the evidence teams began opening the internal records, and the story became uglier than narcotics. Because Black Harbor had not relied only on criminal muscle, it had seeded itself inside law enforcement, local administration, and transport oversight. Investigators reconstructed payment trails and access logs showing exactly how protection had worked. Port inspectors paid to misclassify containers. Transit compliance staff nudged away from random checks on selected dates. Sheriff's deputies who quietly redirected patrol attention during convoy movement. A deputy port security chief who delayed scanner maintenance reports. 2 county records employees who altered ownership history for key warehouse properties. A retired judge serving as private counsel who specialized in slowing forfeiture actions and burying linked civil proceedings. 3 legislative aides feeding policy timing and committee chatter into the fixer network so Voss could anticipate pressure before it arrived. This was not one dirty badge in a parking lot. It was a parallel enforcement system. 26 compromised officials and contractors were identified in the first review alone. Some took cash. Some took campaign support. Some took real estate. Some took private school tuition. Some took debt relief for relatives. One port compliance officer had mortgage payments made for 3 years through a chain of holding companies. Another had his brother's medical bills cleared by a maritime benevolence trust that existed only as a laundering valve. The betrayal cut deeper because it was so ordinary on paper. Tuition, insurance, consulting fees, repairs, grants, all of it clean enough to survive a quick glance, dirty enough to help a drug empire breathe, and the honest people inside the system felt it like a blade. One veteran officer reportedly stared at the arrest log and recognized names he had spent a decade trusting, men who had stood beside him at memorials, women who had sworn the same oath, supervisors who spoke about integrity in public and then fed silence to traffickers in private. A federal agent later described the mood in one evidence room as heavier than any raid scene, not because of the blood, because of the betrayal, because once you realize your enemy had friends inside your own walls, every past failure starts to look different. Federal arrest teams moved fast. A senior sergeant was taken from a county operations center before his shift began. A deputy chief went into cuffs in a parking garage beneath a civic security summit. A port planner was arrested while trying to delete years of emails from a waterfront office. One records analyst broke down the moment agents showed him the transfer chain that paid for his condo. Another kept repeating that he had only moved container flags, nothing more, until investigators laid out overdose photos and shipping sequences tied directly to his approvals. What they were seeing, one federal supervisor said, was not just infiltration. It was a second police structure nested inside the first, a hidden service layer feeding the cartel exactly what it needed: time, invisibility, and controlled blindness. And yet the map still kept widening. Because Black Harbor was not only about Miami. Once analysts pulled the interstate data, the coastal routes, and the rail handoffs together, South Florida emerged as the Atlantic hinge of a much larger fictional network. Loads moved through Miami, then broke north through Jacksonville corridors, Georgia logistics parks, Carolina's trucking exchanges, and warehousing belts farther inland. Some shipments bent west through Gulf routes. Others disappeared into container traffic, then reappeared as inland freight already buried under legitimate paperwork. Shipping manifests were altered upstream. Inspection windows were manipulated. Way stations temporarily closed for maintenance when protected convoys passed. Agricultural routes were used to hide chemical precursors. Migrant smuggling lanes generated noise and chaos, consuming attention while premium narcotics. Loads slid through cleaner channels nearby. Analysts estimated the network, if left intact, could have moved multiple tons of narcotics per week without triggering a full systems alarm. That was the scale of Harbor Crown, not just a drug pipeline, a redesign of regional logistics for cartel permanence, and when they opened the final contingency phase, the language was almost more disturbing than the numbers. It spoke of stabilizing influence, securing the port future, protecting strategic allies, neutralizing regulatory risk, and shaping civic resilience. It sounded like government planning because, in a sense, that was what it had become. The system was being rewritten for cartel longevity. That is the realization that should stay with the viewer. The danger was not only that the Sinaloa Cartel had found roots into South Florida. The danger was that men like Leandro Voss understood that modern criminal empires do not need to live outside institutions anymore. Given enough money, enough discipline, and enough ambitious people willing to trade duty for comfort, organized crime can begin to wear the face of normal administration. It can enter through spreadsheets instead of shootouts, through donor networks instead of street corners, through procurement channels, freight insurance, zoning variance meetings, and polite handshakes in air-conditioned rooms where nobody ever says the word cocaine out loud. But the poison still lands somewhere. It lands in fentanyl deaths that turn bedrooms into crime scenes, in heroin overdoses, in methamphetamine addiction hollowing out people street by street, in families broken by cocaine money they never touched, in trafficking victims reduced to inventory, in migrants treated as camouflage, in neighborhoods that never see the luxury waterfront towers where the orders were signed, only the funerals that followed the distribution.